family. Three of my uncles lived and worked in Cuba prior to Castro taking over because of the movement of peoples in the islands. Over in England, you don't think of it, but there's massive movement and change, and people staying, living, working from the islands. So I think of Cuba and I think, yeah, damn, Cuba was horrific for Africans. Yeah. That's why it took much longer there. And you got to think, well, who was ruling Cuba? Which were the European nations ruling Cuba? Who were the Europeans enslaving the Africans on the Cuban island? And you'll find that many of the fighting or revolutions, not revolutions, but the battling that went on within the Caribbean, you'll tend to find that Africans who came from out of Jamaica, yeah, out of Cuba, and went to other islands, other parts of the Americas to fight. And you think, well, why were Africans from these particular islands so rebellious? And we've got that today, especially from Jamaica, and we've got a particular reputation with the Africans from Jamaica. And you've got to ask, what's the history to these islands? What happened to Africans on those islands? And when you start to check out, you realise that on particular islands, especially in Cuba, especially in Jamaica, they had horrific slave-making processes going down. Yeah? Malcolm X talks about it, and he says it's the part of history we've had to write out of European history because it's too horrific. We as black people have never faced it because we've not looked at that trauma. So therefore we think, well, how can the Europeans look at that trauma when we as a people have never looked at the trauma? They say, well, do you know what slave making consists of? How do you turn a human being into an enslaved human being? You looked at the economic and industrial process of that. Because if you haven't, say, well, get real, it's called post-traumatic slavery syndrome. The Americans call it post-traumatic slavery disorder. Yeah? So, after any traumatic experience, you have 24 hours to do something about it. After 72, it enters the genetic code. Think of what we went through and what's in our genes, the people of African descent from the Americas. Yeah? So that's another important thing that not too many people want to talk about, especially us people of African descent. So think, well, if we can't even talk about it, how can we expect white folk not to talk about the abuser?
There's another side to it, the psychological side. And it's interesting to note that whenever they talk about Europeans going to Africa and bringing Africans back, they always call them slaves. They don't say the Europeans went to Africa and brought Africans over here. They said the Europeans brought slaves. And it's interesting to understand that these people that they brought back, they were Africans, first of all. And they took them to the Caribbean. And the Caribbean were the place where they broke them in.
Breaking islands,
all the islands of the Caribbean, Barbados, Antigua, all those sort of places. The Caribbean was like where they broke them in. The ones whose spirits were broken, they were enslaved. But there were Africans whose spirit couldn't be broken, and they escaped and went and lived up in the mountains, and they formed the Maroon community.
Black Indian armies.
And they're the ones that came back down and raided the plantation, did a quick, let's raid that plantation, burn a few houses, kill a few white people, and then escape back up. But it's that thing in the mindset that the Africans that came over from Africa were actually slaves. They weren't slaves, they were still Africans. The slave making process took place on the Caribbean islands. That's why they took them there, broke them in, and then once they were broken, yes master, 3 bag full master, then they sent them to America, the Carolinas, and that sort of place.
And to think of it today, all you've got to do is say, what name you've got, what language you speak. There's the process today, 2007.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, next time you see that thing, when they talk about bringing slaves from Africa, they weren't slaves, they were Africans first of all.
They were enslaved.
So that's important about the language. Who's telling the story? Who's telling the story, from what perspective is it coming from? If it was the Jewish community, would it be allowed?
Think about that.
Think about it. Would you allow Nazis to tell you the Jewish story and dictate the terms of reference by which it's been told?
I wouldn't allow that.
So that's another important thing.